Hey, what's up everyone? Even though it's a couple of years old, today I'm going to review the Sony 20mm 1.8G lens and tell you why I finally bought it. First of all, thanks for choosing to watch my video and hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. If you do enjoy the video and it adds value, please consider liking the video a thumbs up and subscribing. I would really appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's dive right in. Today we're talking about the Sony 20mm 1.8G lens. And let me tell you, this lens is amazing. But context is everything. So let me tell you a little bit about why I bought this lens and what my comparison points are, since I've owned quite a few ultra wide angle lenses. You see, I was originally switching to Sony mirrorless from Canon DSLRs. When I switched over, I purchased the Sony 16-35 f2.8G Master because, you know, I had to have the best of the best. Now, the lens was beautiful and overall I was initially impressed. But then as I used it more and more, I realized I wasn't as happy as I thought I was, given the price I paid for it brand new, which was around 3,000 Canadian dollars. The performance of the lens was on point, don't get me wrong. But in my experience and opinion, the perceived value to cost ratio just wasn't there. It was super sharp, which I loved, but I absolutely loathed the extending barrel that you extended and retracted as you changed focal lengths. This was not ideal for gimbal work at all, as it threw off your calibration, but it was just annoying as well. So I put it up for sale. But I actually ended up trading the lens with another fellow photographer I met, and I ended up with the Sigma 14-24 f2.8 Art Series lens. Let me tell you, I loved that lens as well, too, for the shots I was able to take with it. The metal construction made you feel like you owned a premium lens, and the sharpness was right on up there, on par with the Sony 16-35. I could not tell the difference between the two. I gained 2mm of focal range, and my ultra wide angle shots just had a special look to them that really impressed me. The downside to this lens was the weight of the lens, as well as the bulbous front element which I just couldn't get over. I knew what I was getting into it from owning the Tamron 15-30, which had the same front element. And I always told myself I'd never own another bulbous front element lens again, because I would always worry about scratching them or smashing the front element by accident, despite being super careful with my gear. While rear ND filters were made possible by Haida for the Sigma 14-24 lens, there was still no cheap way and easy way to protect the front element. I also found that this lens was extremely heavy compared to the Sony 16-35 GM. And for those reasons alone, I was always hesitant to bring it along anywhere in my bag or put it on my camera for photo or video. Alas, I never did put it on a gimbal. So I ended up selling the Sigma 14-24 f2.8 Art as well. So finally, after watching numerous reviews as well as finding a fantastic deal on a used copy of the lens, I decided I would take the dive on the Sony 20mm f1.8G lens. Let me tell you, I am happy about it. And these are the top 3 reasons I chose this lens and why hopefully this is my final ultra wide angle lens purchase. Number 1, the weight. You'll notice I focus on the weight of a lens a lot, and for good reason. As a wedding photographer, I used to carry around 2 DSLRs outfitted with a 70-200 2.8 zoom lens, as well as a 24-70 f2.8 zoom lens, or a prime lens of my choice. Both cameras also had battery grips as well, so I've definitely had my share of carrying heavy gear. But as I've grown older, I found the desire to keep things simple, easy, light, and mobile. The Sony 20mm f1.8G is super light. It only weighs 375 grams. This helps to keep things simple and mobile, and have a greater desire to use the lens more because of this, instead of keeping it in the camera bag to never take it out. For video work on a gimbal, this lens will not add any significant weight to your total setup. So you'll not only have an easier time with balancing and calibration, but you'll also feel less fatigued after shooting. Number 2, the size. This lens is tiny. You can easily fit it in a mirrorless body and put it in your jacket pocket if you don't feel like carrying a bag, or put it in a bag and have plenty of room to spare. To show you how small this lens is, Here is a comparison of it beside a Sony battery you're likely familiar with. Now let's take a look at how the size of this lens compares to other Sony lenses you might be familiar with or own. Without going into too much detail, as it is quite evident, here is the 20mm beside the Sony 35mm f1.4 GM, Sony 85mm 1.4 GM, and the Sony 135mm 1.8 GM. If you don't own any of these lenses, a comparison might not add much value, so hopefully the comparison to a Sony battery helps. I personally like to use UV filters on my lenses to protect the front glass element, and so for the 20mm f1.G, the size is 67mm, which is the same size as my 35mm f1.4G, as well as my Laowa 100mm 2x macro, which also means I can interchange the ND filters as well as the UV filters in a worst case scenario. 3. Let's talk about the price. At the time of producing this video, this lens retails for approximately $1,200 Canadian, plus tax. That's cheaper than the 24mm f1.4G Master, which is $1,900 plus tax, a whopping $700 difference for a near identical lens, and I say near identical. As I am not diving into technical specs and performance, I do invite you to check out some of the other great, fantastic reviews on YouTube comparing the performance of the 20mm G to the 24mm GM. And a large consensus is that they perform very identically or similarly, minus the focal range difference and the aperture difference. Many have also said that the 20mm G lens could easily have been labeled as a GM lens. Now let's get back to the price. The Sony 20mm is also much cheaper than the Sony 12 to 24 2.8 GM at $4,000 and the 16 to 35 2.8 at $3,000. Mind you, the 20mm is a prime and the other two are zoom lenses. So if you need the versatility of a zoom lens and can't necessarily move your feet and body as easily with a prime lens, those might be great choices for you. There is also the 14mm 1.8 GM lens, which costs $2,100. Again, substantially more than the 20mm 1.8G. If you are worried about the bulbous front elements like I am, the 14mm as well as both 12 to 24mm both have front glass like that. If you need the versatility of a zoom range but you can't really afford the f2.8 apertures, you can always go for the slightly cheaper option of Sony 12 to 24 f4G priced at $2,300. I would have loved to do a comparison to Tamron or other Sigma lenses, but I'm sorry, I only use Sony lenses. I'm kind of a Sony slob. Slob? I meant snob. Sony snob. So now that you know my top 3 reasons why I think this lens is a great value, I'll share with you that I got my used copy of the 20mm 1.8G for $850. Now that was a steal. Now, lenses generally have a good resale price, so if you can't necessarily buy the lens brand new, I highly suggest finding a reputable seller on your favorite buy and sell app, or find a website with reputable store that resells camera gear. I find you can save quite a bit if you're okay testing a used lens and purchasing it if you are satisfied. Now that I've shared my thoughts with you, I'd love to share some photos and video that I shot with only the Sony 20mm 1.8G so you can see firsthand the quality of this superb lens. Hey everyone, so right now I have the Sony 20mm 1.8G on my a7S III on a DJI gimbal, the RS2. Now, I am holding it one-handed. It's a little bit heavy, but the focal range is perfect for vlogging. As you can see, I'm holding the camera about 1 foot away from me, but it gets a lot of the background and scenery in view, so it's perfect. Alright, so switching over to some video here, I've got some shots here on my a7S III and DJI RS2. I do believe the aperture was at approximately f5.6, and as you can see, the image is quite wide and it is quite clear and sharp, which I was very happy with. Now switching over to this scene, I did try some close-ups. The aperture is f1.8, really to illustrate the bokeh, and how fantastic it is with the separation of the foreground and the background. Now let's take a look at some photos. I am using off-camera flash in this session, and my aperture is set at f6.3. My distance changes between 2 feet to approximately 4 to 5 feet to illustrate some of the wide-angle shots. As you can see in this photo, it is quite sharp, and I was quite close at approximately 2 feet. And then you see me step back, and I take this photo, which is also at f6.3. Very sharp and very wide. I'll also show you a couple more sample photos such as this one, same aperture, but really goes to show you just how wide this lens captures the scenery and how sharp it really is. Little bit of distortion on the bottom angle there. And then we have a shot without off-camera flash, just f1.8 to show you the background blur. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you had fun and found this video valuable. If you did, I'd really appreciate if you could like my video and subscribe so I can continue to grow this channel and make videos for you guys. I would truly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. I will do my absolute best to try and respond to everyone. Until next time, bye for now and keep shooting.